So, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the International Literature Festival on the topic, The Future of Bioeconomy. I'm Alexandra Wandel. I'm from World Future Council. We are a forum of 50 global changemakers from around the world whose mission is to promote the interests of future generations. And I'm very happy that we have an excellent panel tonight with very interesting speakers. And of course, we also want to invite the audience for questions and answers. But first of all, let me introduce our panelists for tonight. And first of all, I would like to introduce our speaker from Mexico. So tonight, I hope we can see him here at the back of the screen. A very warm welcome to Homero Aridjis from Mexico. So he is not only author, he is also an environmental activist and diplomat. He has written, in addition to poems and novels, he has also written child books, essays, theater plays. He has taught at American University. He represented Mexico as an ambassador in the Netherlands, in Switzerland, and at the UNESCO. He was also president of PEN International, and he's also co-founder of the activist group Grupo de los Yes, which is dedicated to ethical issues and environmental issues. So we are so happy to have you with us. Homero Aridjis, again, a warm welcome.
Thank you.
And then next to me is Stig Tanzmann. Stig is a farmer and an agriculture scientist. Since 2010, he has been working as an expert on agriculture for Bread for the World, which operates internationally. He has also written a scenario for bioeconomy for an international conference which was convened by Forum Environment and Development. And it is a scenario for bioeconomy, utopia and dystopia for the year 2048. He's focusing in his work on agroecology, on seeds, and on genetic engineering. So we are so happy to have Stig with us tonight. Also, warm welcome to Stig. And last but not least, we have Linus Steinmetz with us. Linus is from Göttingen in Germany. He has been involved with Fridays for Future since 2018, and he has played a key role in organizing the first large-scale demonstrations in Göttingen for Fridays for Future. And he is here in charge of nationwide campaigning, also public relations, international work. And he has also sued the federal government of Germany together with Luisa Neubauer. So thank you, Linus, for joining us tonight. I also want to mention that it was listed in the program that Timothy Morton and Barbara Unwüstig would join us, but they had to apologize for the meeting tonight. But we are very happy that now also we have these eminent panelists with us. So before we will start with the panel discussion, I'm very happy that we will now hear from the actor Matthias Cervenikas an abstract from a book from Homero Aridjis. So please also give a warm welcome to Matthias. He's joining us on stage.
Die Apokalypse wird das Werk des Menschen sein, nicht Gottes. In der Welt des 21. Jahrhunderts, die von Atomkriegen, globalen Umweltzerstörungen und schrecklichen Plagen wie der des Coronavirus bedroht ist, die uns gleichzeitig an die mittelalterlichen Plagen und an die von der Science-Fiction beschriebenen Plagen der Zukunft erinnern, haben wir das Gefühl, dass die neue Apokalypse bereits begonnen hat und dass es nur eine Frage der Zeit ist, bis sie Gestalt annimmt. Aber in einem sind wir uns sicher. Obwohl das Ende irdisch sein wird, wird es unvorhersehbare Auswirkungen auf den Kosmos haben. Die Apokalypse wird zweifellos ökologisch sein, mit unabsehbaren Folgen für die menschliche Psyche, Denn wie wir bei der Coronavirus-Pandemie gesehen haben, wird der Terror uns bedrängen und werden uns auch Krankheit sowie Krieg heimsuchen. Und zu unserem Übel wird es wie eine totale Verdunklung des Bewusstseins wirken. Wenn man Daniel Defoe in seinem Tagebuch zum Jahr der Pest parodiert, könnte man sagen, von allen Plagen, mit denen die Menschheit verflucht wird, ist die Tyrannei der Angst die schlimmste. In diesem Sinne glaube ich, dass die Apokalypse eine lokale und globale Entschöpfung des Lebens auf der Erde sein wird. Der Wurzel und Quelle des Lebens, Mensch, Tier und Pflanze und der 4 Elemente, Wasser, Luft, Erde und Feuer, in seiner spirituellen Form, dem Licht. Dies sind Elemente, die seit den griechischen vorsokratischen Philosophen und den Mythen verschiedener Kulturen über die Ursprünge des Menschen als Grund und Ursache unserer Existenz und derjenigen der Wesen gelten, die mit uns den irdischen Raum teilen. Obschon wir in einem Zeitalter leben, das durch den Klimawandel und die systematische und wahnsinnige Plünderung der Ökosysteme und aller Lebensbereiche bedroht ist, herrscht eine Gewissheit. Wenn die Ozeane sterben, wird der Planet sterben. Und noch etwas. Es wird den irdischen Tod geben, den biologischen, aber nicht das jüngste Gericht. Das Universum wird sich in seiner unendlichen Ausdehnung fortsetzen, aber ohne uns. Die Apokalypse wird ein kontinuierlicher Verfall der Umwelt sein, eine systematische Zersetzung der Arche des biotischen Reichtums. Es wird eine lange Qual der Natur sein, ein Triumph des Todes, ein geistiger Zusammenbruch. Der allgemeine Verfall des Lebens, wie wir es kennen, wird von einer moralischen Atropie begleitet sein, einem Auseinanderbrechen des menschlichen Bewusstseins, das Jahrhunderte und Jahrtausende überdauert hat. In unserer Verzweiflung werden wir uns von unendlicher Bitterkeit darüber überwältigt sein, dass wir die Zerstörer des irdischen Paradieses gewesen sind, dass wir vom Kainismus zum letzten Akt übergegangen sind, dem Muttermord, dem Mord an der lebendigen Erde und damit zur Tötung des biologischen Gottes. Die Apokalypse wird nicht aus heiterem Himmel geschehen. Sie wird sich über Jahrzehnte, Jahrhunderte und Jahrtausende hinziehen. Sie wird einen Wettlauf in die entgegengesetzte Richtung unserer mythischen Schöpfung sein. Unsere Tage werden dunkel, kalt oder furchtbar heiß sein. Deshalb werden wir nur mit seiner aktiven, individuellen und kollektiven Bewegung des Bewusstseins, die von der gesamten Menschheit ausgeht, in der Lage sein, sie zu stoppen. In diesen Zeiten der schrecklichen globalen Plage des Coronavirus, das mehrere 100.000 Todesopfer gefordert hat, sind wir uns unserer Zerbrechlichkeit bewusst geworden. Sie hat eine solche Psychose hervorgerufen, dass sich einige von uns wie mittelalterliche Mönche vor dem schwarzen Tod fühlen oder wie Figuren der Zukunft in der Erzählung des Grauens. Nun erscheint der Mensch wehrlos und verletzlich, bedroht von unsichtbaren und unfühlbaren Viren, von unkontrollierbaren Naturgewalten, genauso wie der Mensch sich vor den Schrecken des Jahres 1000 fühlte. Aus diesem Grund ist es notwendig, dass wir eine vollständige Gewissenserforschung in Bezug auf unsere Beziehung zur Natur machen. Es ist dringend notwendig, dass unsere Generation sich der Situation gewachsen zeigt und ein für allemal die Lebensbereiche respektiert. Wie bei der Panik, die durch die erste bevorstehende Jahrtausendwende angesichts der existenziellen und moralischen Zerrüttung der kosmischen Ordnung hervorgerufen wurde, so ist auch in unserer Zeit unser gewohnter Alltag davon betroffen. Mehr als 1 Million der 8 Millionen existierenden Arten der Pflanzen- und Tierwelt sind vom Aussterben bedroht. Laut einem Bericht der UNO aus dem Jahr 2019 sind 75% der Landökosysteme und 66% der Meeresökosysteme bereits stark verändert. Mehr als 85% der Feuchtgebiete, die 1700 existierten, sind mittlerweile nicht mehr vorhanden.
And now Homero Aridjis will read out of the book, The Prophecy of Man.
A prophecy of man. Clouds hung like grape skins. Rivers turned stagnant and died. Birds and fish were destroyed. Trees shriveled in the mountains. The last whale sank in the water like a cathedral. The elephant perished in the zoo of an airless city. The sun, a yolk thrown in the mud. Masked men without night, without day, walk alone through the black garden. Thank you.
Thank you. So let me turn now my first question, opening this panel discussion on the bioeconomy, to Stig Tanzmann from Bread for the World. We have heard the terrible situation on ecosystem destruction and biodiversity, and there is a debate going on whether actually, if we now replace fossil fuels with bio-based raw materials, it can help to preserve ecosystems, to preserve genetic diversity and also species. Is this an opportunity, Stig?
Well, from our perspective, no. And especially not if it's asked in that broad manner, because it means just replacing our growth model based on fossil fuels, raw materials, with bio-based materials. And that is just, I mean, if we have a degrowth agenda, a very hard degrowth agenda, then we can maybe talk about it. But if we just replace, then things will just get worse. They will destroy even more. We will have all these sugarcane plantations for ethanol and all of that. That is already a massive, massive problem. And it is already a driver of destruction of ecosystems. And the whole bioeconomy, it is a very problematic, from our perspective, a very problematic system, or try to change things. And I think if we talk about literature, we also come to other things, not about the things that we can grip or can really understand and see, like agrofuels, agrofuel production and all of that, the physical things. We also have to deal with genome editing, like the whole story of new GMOs. It's a very, genome editing that is, it's not literature, but it's like how I work on a text. And it's suggesting that we can, as humans, just rewrite nature if we replace certain things in the DNA and everything. I think that is, for me, it's, I mean, what I would now translate Entschöpfung, also a bit in the direction of dismantling creation. And for me, some things about genome editing are about dismantling creation. I mean, extreme forms of genome editing, like gene drives, they are set and used to delete species. Like target malaria is trying to delete mosquitoes from our ecosystems. And these things are part of bioeconomy. If you look at the German bioeconomy strategy, it is all linked to using biological knowledge, biological systems in a very economic way. So that is problematic. So if I would grip bioeconomy much wider than only speaking about replacing abiotic materials like steel, coal, oil and all of that with natural resources, but also it is about knowledge, it is about really rewriting creation. So that is, it's a very heavy, very strong and dangerous system right now.
Thank you very much, Stig. So that leads me on to a question to Linus from Fridays for Future. I mean, Fridays for Future stands for calling on politicians to go for climate action. And we now see that, for instance, big companies, big corporations now move towards carbon neutrality goals. And also, for instance, now start mass plantation of monocultures. So my question to you would be, is there a danger that your action actually leads to corporations or politics to move towards harmful exploitation of nature in the name of carbon neutrality?
Yeah, I think I understand what you mean. And I don't think that like our movement, like Fridays for Future, is actually leading to big corporations establishing monocultures or things like that. But I do see the risk in having very or not having nature-based solutions to the climate crisis. So what we as Fridays for Future are saying is, for example, that you can. I mean, the whole climate crisis came from companies and nations misusing our ecosystem and misusing our CO2 emission cycle in a way that was unsustainable. So another interference in that natural cycle that is also obviously there to gain profit is just as bad. So we say, for example, we need nature-based solutions, like, for example, reforestation in a biodiverse way instead of profit-based solutions being provided by companies.
Thank you. So let me move to Homero, to Mexico. We know that in Latin America, where you are located, the situation of biodiversity loss is particularly severe. We know about the Amazon destruction, the lung of the earth being increasingly destroyed, and indigenous people being threatened. And I would like to ask you now specifically on the Latin American situation, and with your background as an author, but also as an environmental activist, what kind of vision do you actually have for a utopia, for a strategy, for a bioeconomy that could actually serve people and nature and also indigenous people?
Well, let me give an example of rampant use of fossil fuels in Latin America. Mexico has the worst kind of energy policy. The government is increasing the use of coal in power plants. It is building a new and unnecessary oil refinery. The state-owned power company, the Federal Electricity Commission, is increasing the use of highly polluting fuel oil in thermoelectrical plants. The government has canceled renewable power actions and is restricting access to the grid for renewable power such as solar and wind energy. Mexico will not fulfill its commitment to the Paris Agreement and will become an international pariah as far as climate change actions are concerned. There are 182 protected natural areas in Mexico, covering more than 25 million hectares. Funding for the National Commission for Protected Natural Areas and for the knowledge and use of biodiversity has been cut by 75%, leaving them unable to protect Mexico's natural wealth. Two vastly destructive government projects, the new oil refinery and the Mayan train, will receive more government funding in 2021 than the entire Ministry of the Environment. In December 2016, I published a proposal to build a vast series of solar plants along the Mexican side of the United States-Mexican border. instead of spending 70 billion on a wall that will be an ecological nightmare and easily crossed in 2 minutes with a handmade ladder and a rope. A solar border would provide clean energy that could power cities and industries on both sides of the border, as well as the surrounding region, with a much smaller environmental footprint than fossil fuel plants with the same capacity. An additional benefit is solar power desalination plants that could be placed on the coast of the Pacific Ocean, the Gulf of Mexico, and the northern Gulf of California. Via pipelines, these facilities would provide fresh water for people, agriculture, and wildlife preservation, thus alleviating the worst ravages of climate change that have been forecast for the border region in the decades to come. Solar arrays draws surrounded by chain link fences would also curb the cross-border traffic of drugs, arms, and people far more effectivamente than a 30-foot wall. They can protect delicate ecosystems. They use mitigation techniques such as land bridges, tunnels, and passing areas for threatened species, including Mexican gray wolves, jaguars, and ocelots. And in some areas, the solar arrays could be used to provide shade and water collection for heat-sensitive food crops. In other areas, they could be used to create what scientists have described as a solar reef, in which local flora and fauna able to themselves of the shade provided by the solar panels. If solar experts argue that social border would be technically and economically feasible. If either nation were to adopt our proposal, many of the worst problems afflicting the bilateral relationship would be ameliorated, thousands of good jobs would be created, an immense return on investment would be guaranteed, and an unprecedented abundance of cheap, clean energy would be generated.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So renewable energy, investing in solar power is a way forward, as described by Homero. Is that also something that Fridays for Future is working on, trying to scale up renewable energy?
Yes. So essentially, Fridays for Future's position in that regard is very clear. We're mainly focused on expanding renewable energies in Europe and in Germany. And this, of course, is the basis for all our work on climate protection. So we cannot have climate neutrality and therefore some sort of saving of biodiversity in all the world if we don't generate all our power until 2035 in Europe by solar or wind or other renewable means. So this is definitely a priority. And of course, there's different kind of strategies depending on the country. So for example, in the EU, there's a huge need for more solar energy, which is not being worked on as good as it could be by the European Commission.
Thank you. So let me get back again to the issue of the bioeconomy. We have heard in the start of this panel discussion the negative scenario where we could move forward with a very negative outlook, and all the scientists are giving strong signals that we are moving towards a disaster. So I would like to get back to Stig. You have written actually a study looking into two different scenarios on the bioeconomy for this seminar of Forum Environment and Development. So you looked into a scenario into the future where on the one hand we can have a utopia and the other one we can have dystopia. So my question would be, what would be the way to move towards utopia?
Well, I have to correct you a bit because
Yes?
I mean, it's not actually a study. It was also a scenario workshop. So where we had to describe a positive scenario, and that was not me. That was Rupert Ebner from Slow Food Germany, and he was part of the positive. I was more for the negative one.
Okay.
And so that is like a complete. It was like a scenario workshop. How would we imagine a positive one? Well, with bioeconomy, I don't see a positive one right now. Not at least how it is defined at the moment, and not the way the policies are developed and the safety measures that are in place. For me, bioeconomy is rather dystopia because it continues our current economic growth and explosion model. It just replaces the basis of it. It replaces coal, oil, steel with natural resources. And we don't have these natural resources. We don't have these natural resources for 8 billion people and for our current way of consumption. So unless we come up with huge cut rates of consumption of certain things and with real recycling, not pseudo-recycling as we have it with plastics, there's no way that bioeconomy can work, but it is rather a green print for apocalypse. And it's just a delusion, and it's, so we would have to change it, and we have to accept limits of growth and limits of consumption. And that is the debate that we, especially I would say in Germany and in Europe, need to start. What are our limits? How much do we need? How much do we have actually? And it's much less than what we consume. And the whole within bioeconomy, it is economy with a bit of bio or with a bit of green, and that is the problem. So that's all defined from an economic perspective, and it puts nature even more under economic pressure. And that is where I see the massive danger. So if you ask me then about the positive and utopist scenario, then I would say that is rather what we see in agroecology, especially what has been developed bottom up in Latin America, also working with ecology, working with biodiversity, not working against and exploiting biodiversity, which bioeconomy is doing. So we have to find our place as human beings again within biodiversity. We are part of it. We have to nurture biodiversity, and we have to learn to work well and coexist with biodiversity and not destroy it. And that is what agroecology is doing, and it was developed by very, very poor people with having no resources. So they just used the resources that they have, and they made very sure that they're not overusing it. And then in the further development, agroecology is also very much based on human rights principles, on the right to food, right to health, and other things. So that is where we have to come to again, to a rights-based, biodiversity-based development system. And that is something that, from my perspective, can be developed within agroecology. And there we can also find ways of using energy in a different way or creating different energy, but being one again and not exploiting it further and growing further. We have to find a way to come back to where we come from, and also to respect nature and people, indigenous people working and living with nature since thousands and millions of years.
Thank you. Homero, can you build up on what we just heard from Stig? I would like to get back to you again, to Latin America, the situation. So what do you see, what still needs to happen in Latin America to ensure that we really respect nature, that we reduce consumption from Europe here? But how do we really move forward to actually more model of utopia rather than dystopia?
Well, the first sentence I have to say is that the Amazonia is in flames, and that is terrible news for the planet in these days. Because 40% of the world's tropical forests are found in Amazonia, and 15% of Earth's biodiversity. In the last 50 years, 800,000 of Amazonia's original 4 million square kilometers have been sacrificed to logging, agriculture, and cattle ranching, mining, dams, and road construction. The area loses the size of Pakistan. Every year, its forests absorb 1,500,000,000 tons of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, breaking climate change. 60% of the Amazonia is in Brazil, as everybody knows. The human population of Greater Amazonia was as high as 10 million before it was decimated by slavery, epidemics of imported European diseases such as influenza, smallpox, and measles, starvation, and barbarity. What is now Brazil was first discovered and claimed for Portugal in 1500 by navigator and explorer Pedro Álvares Cabral. Brazil's president, Jair Messias Bolsonaro, is without a doubt the head of a state who poses the greatest danger to the environment. He intends to exploit Amazonia's biodiversity and rejects what he calls the Chiita ecologies of NGOs. He also criticizes what he labels like the industry of demarcation of indigenous territories, practiced by previous administrations. Since taking office, he has been encouraging cattle ranchers, loggers, large landowners, and speculators and multinational corporations to slash and burn their way deeper into the Amazonia. Some 350 tribes with a total population of around 900,000 people have been allotted 690 territories. The Ticuna are the largest tribe living in the Amazon with 40,000 members, but the larger territory in the Amazon belongs to the Yanomami, numbering 19,000. Above 100 uncontacted groups are thought to live in the Amazon. On August 26, 2019, the Chingu peoples posted a video of a tribal representative speaking to the world. He said, while the world prays for the Amazon, fearing what can happen in the future, we've gathered all of Chingu's riverine and indigenous people, and we want to say that we are going to resist for the forest, for our way of living, to produce without destroying, for the future of our children and grandchildren, for the planet. So we say no to mining in our lands, no to deforestation, no more invasions and disrespect, no more pesticides in our rivers and our food, no more criminal fires in the forest. We from Chingu are connected with you, all together, standing for the Amazon. We are in the front line and we need your support. In the zeal to sacrifice the environment to agriculture, Brazil is the world's largest exporter of soy. Bolsonaro has approved use of 262 new pesticides, not used before in Brazil, 1/3 of which are banned in the European Union. The death of 500 million honeybees in Brazil last year has been blamed on pesticides. Invoking national sovereignty as a justification for exploiting and devastating natural resources is a common argument made by governments while asserting that benefits for the people will ensue. But the opposite is usually true, and the population affected by the disappearance of their natural environment are left in a worse state than before. Who is entitled to sovereignty in Amazonia? The descendants of peoples who have lived in and off the forest lands since they were first inhabited, or the descendants of conquerors and the spoilers who brutally subjected the local inhabitants to their power. The descendants of this early indigenous society have vested rights, indeed vested of ownership in Amazonia. How legitimate is the accusation made by Bolsonaro, the descendant of 19th century European immigrants to Brazil, that he said French President Emmanuel Macron showed a colonialist mentality when he called the fires a global crisis. More than 1,000 major fires have been registered in the Amazon region since late May, rising in September to 53 major fires per day. The world's largest tropical wetland, the Pantanal in Brazil, is being consumed by fire. They limiting global warming to below 2 degrees centigrade above pre-industrial levels as agreed by 195 countries in the 2015 Paris Agreement. So this is a planetary issue, not only of sovereign concern to Brazil. This week, 8 European countries addressed a letter to the Brazilian government threatening economic consequences if increasing deforestation is not reversed. Ever since the March 1985 founding of the Group of 100, an association of writers, artists, and scientists in defense of the environment, I have been fighting to halt destruction of Amazonia. In a letter to Brazilian President José Sarney in April 1981, 30 prominent Latin American intellectuals called on him to save the Amazon. We sent a further letter signed by dozens of writers from 22 countries to Sarney on Earth Day, calling for an end to ecocide and ethnocide in the Amazon region. In June 1992, when I spoke of the Open Forum during the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro, I said that because crimes committed against nature which have global repercussions must be seen as crimes and against humanity. These crimes should be brought before an international court of the environment, a tribunal for the prosecution of ecocides, whether they are countries, economic entities, or individuals. Today, as Bolsonaro stalls and Amazonia dwindles before our eyes, if such a court now existed, Jair Bolsonaro would be brought before it as a criminal. However, in his absence, Bolsonaro should be brought before the International Criminal Court in The Hague, Netherlands. There are currently 123 member states, although not all ratified the statute. Brazil did so in 2002. The states accept the jurisdiction of the court with respect to the crime of genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and the crime of aggression. Genocide is defined by the statute as acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, and deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. Only a member state can refer crimes and the commission of atrocities to the International Criminal Court. Environmental crimes are within its jurisdiction. Getting a state to do so is not easy, but this could be the only route to stop Bolsonaro before it is too late. A head of a state is not exempted from criminal responsibility. The process would take years, but the initial referral could be made quickly and would shine a spotlight on ongoing threats of genocide. Applying pressure now and ultimately setting a cautionary precedent for other heads of South American governments who see themselves as sovereigns of Amazonia. For example, Germany could refer Bolsonaro's declared war on Brazil's indigenous citizens, whose lives and livelihoods are in jeopardy, to the court prosecutor, who would take it from there. Bolsonaro has to be stopped.
Thank you. That's a very clear appeal that Bolsonaro needs to be sued and taken to the international court. So that is very clear. So
Yes.
thank you so much for this strong appeal. I would like to now open the floor, as we're just at this point of discussion, just to see if there are some immediate questions from the audience. If not, then we will continue, because we were just talking about the crimes that are taking place against humanity. These are also crimes against future generations, but there are also crimes that are taking place against nature, and Bolsonaro has been mentioned. At the same time, we have heard from Stig Tanzmann that there's a general problem of the economic growth model that is pursued. And that also certain issues that you mentioned, like deforestation, the use of pesticides, is also something that relates directly to the responsibilities that we also have here in Germany, given that trade agreements are concluded that are leading to deforestation. Also pesticides are exported by German companies that are harmful. Stig, you mentioned agroecology as a way forward. So could you elaborate more about what is agroecology and what are now the ways forward to scale it up?
So, I mean, what is agroecology? It's always a bit difficult. I mean, it is a movement. It's a movement of people. It's the movement of the people on the ground. So Fridays for Future could be part of agroecology because they are demanding change. It is a science. That means you build up on traditional knowledge, the knowledge of indigenous people, of the people that are being sacrificed for deforestation, and on their knowledge. But you combine it with modern science, with modern scientific methods that accept the precaution principle and that express that respect also the indigenous people. So that is a way forward. It's a different way of thinking things. And yes, we could and should make things forward if we could give more financial support in that direction, but also if we change certain laws. I mean, you mentioned the point of the pesticide companies. I mean, we have a huge responsibility in Germany in this area. I mean, BASF and Bayer, they are under the top 5 or the top 3 of selling agrotoxicos. And Brazil is their growth market. Mm-hmm. I mean, that is where they want to refinance especially Bayer wants to refinance their taking over or buying of Monsanto. So we need also to prohibit certain things. We have really to say, okay, what things cannot be done and what things can be done. What we see, there is a bit of an opening within the German government for agroecology, but only in development aid. I mean, if we look at the common agriculture policy reform, there's nothing happening. So there we're going still in a very climate negative intensive way of production. So it would really mean to change our way of consumption and production. More diversity, eating more different crops and different fruits. We cannot survive eating only 10 different crops or less. That will not help. And also we must stop working on the false solutions. And I wanted to come back to the Bolsonaro thing, because I think that is a crucial thing. I mean, we had a very, very strong agroecology movement in Brazil. Mm-hmm. We have a lot of, as Bradford, a lot of partners working there. They came up with very good policies on school meals, on supporting small farmers, doing the right things, making it possible for indigenous people to finally market their products, but not to surrender to the market. And I want to take this bottle because it's such a striking point. It is a glass bottle, but you have the Coca-Cola company, and they're using now this "I'm Green" trademarked. So they're using a lot. That is a typical bioeconomy product, plastic bottle from bioplastic, which is based on sugarcane from Brazil. Mm-hmm. And also a lot of organic producers are starting now to mix their plastics with bioplastic. It is problematic, but the whole company standing behind the sugarcane bottles, or the half sugarcane bottle, it's Braskem, and Braskem is also owned by the Odebrecht conglomerate, which is one of the biggest companies in Brazil, who is part of the whole corruption scandal and corruption system in Brazil. So we have also a lot of Bolsonaro possibly in our local diet, or the way we consume food, and there are drinks, which of course by Coca-Cola are completely unhealthy, but we have to look at all the things and try to understand it, because else we will not come to a change. Bolsonaro is a massive problem, but we have to come back to the point that we change again governments. We are very concerned about what is happening in Brazil, because a lot of our partners, a lot of people that I know personally are threatened by death under this government. But we need to find ways to change, and this means also to change the way we trade and the way that we ask for trade agreements. That means also to stop always asking for changing seed laws, changing certain marketing laws that can only be fulfilled by huge multinational companies, because only they can reach certain hygiene criteria that are set only for massive and long value chains. Agroecology means short value nets, not value chains anymore. It is a complete changing of the way also we think and how an economy or how a food system can work. Changing, going away from the colonial crops like sugarcane, soy, palm oil, also going away from wheat, a bit from maize, or going back to the varieties of maize, the diversity of maize. Yes. I mean, Mexico is the origin of maize, and maize there has been used in such a different way. Now maize in the US and also here is made for biogas or ethanol or whatever. So that is also a problem, and changing the way we look at the way we eat, the way we consume, and then the way we treat. And there are good principles by the Food and Agriculture Organization coming up, they have been published. They're good, encouraging policies, which have also been covered and published by the World Future Council. I think we can orientate and have to fight for certain things in this direction, and to respect the farmers and the work of the people that are living and working in rural areas.
Linus, you want to come in and add from the Fridays for Future perspective on what we just heard from Stig?
Yeah, I can only add to that, Stig. I I think the sugarcane bottle Bolsonaro example is perfect to illustrate that we can't just look at the surface of an ecological or economic or in Bolsonaro's case, authoritarian crisis and say this is happening, but we also need to analyze and recognize that this crisis is going on now because we have been living and consuming very, very unsustainable for the last 40 to 70 years. And I think these are the main dynamics that we need to recognize. I think this is also why I agree with your analysis on bioeconomy more generally, that we need to look at the basic fundamentals of how we do economics before just shifting from the one unsustainable economic practice to the next.
Good. So would someone like to come in now from the audience? I'd just like to see, because we don't want to exclude anyone from the discussion here. So maybe someone wants to still raise one question. I'm just having a look, because we still have a beautiful poem from Homero from Mexico at the end of this panel discussion. But I would like now to move on in the discussion and I think we're getting closer to the point that bioeconomy, this is a concluding panel at the International Literature Festival, that bioeconomy has so many risks and so many threats, and that rather we need to look into the way how we consume, the way how we produce things, and to produce a system that is in line and in harmony with nature, that also serves the needs of people, but also serves the need of future generations. And next year, actually, we are now in the middle of the corona crisis globally. Now, many governments are developing so-called building back programs. So there's a whole movement of building back better globally, of seeing we need to do better than we have done in the past. So, and in addition to that, we also now have governments planning major events. Next year will be a big year. There will be the Biodiversity Summit, there will be the Climate Summit, there will be a World Food Summit. And of course, certainly, there will be also the continuation of trade agreements that will be concluded. So, Stig, what is your plan? Because you're also part of the German Civil Society Forum. What are your plans for this upcoming year to really make a difference now?
Oh, well, that is a big question, and it's a massive challenge for us, because especially the corona crisis limits very, very much the space of action. And I mean, right now, all the preparation for all these big conferences that are coming up, they're all virtually. So there's very, very few physical meetings. That means that especially the people most affected by certain problems, which have rights to speak in certain areas, and certain UN bodies, they have massive problems to raise their voices, because they have low internet connectivity. And if you sit then in a huge call and a huge preparation call, the governments, they will just cut your space, and you cannot see, oh, there's an uprising from the audience or whatever. So it makes it easier to change things. Of course, CBD, so like the Convention on Biological Diversity, that is a very, very important conference for biodiversity, I would say. And I think that is, for me, also the most shocking thing about the German bioeconomy strategy. It is not built on the principles on the Convention on Biological Diversity, then we wouldn't have all these problems. Mm-hmm. But it is built on economy and replacing or changing our economy system, but not being based on the UN conventions who deal with biodiversity. So that would be something. Personally, we will have to really concentrate on the upcoming food system summit, because I work in the policy department of Bread for the World, working on agriculture, I touch biodiversity. I have other specialists who work on climate. So they will, of course, focus on the climate summit, but we will focus on this very problematic food system summit, where we see a massive, massive lack of representation of indigenous people, of poor farmers, of the most affected by hunger. And we really have to see if we can still get it right or not. So that is something big upcoming for us, where we already insert a certain process. And of course, we have to inform ourselves, inform new movements, and see how we can not go back to normal, but come back in a different way and really change. And that we don't see, that we see a lot of people, they just want to go back to business as usual and to come back to the old things. But I would like to be a bit optimistic, maybe, also in the end. I think certain things, how we handle the virus in Europe or in Germany, I would say after now we are also a bit more learning about what is the precaution principle does it mean. So we wear masks, we really try to limit the spread of the virus and not to go full force back to normal. And I think we need this much, much more in a lot of political decisions and in a lot of things, really thinking about what does it mean? Is this decision reversible? Is it really good for the long and the short time future? And can our grandchildren still live in the world that we leave behind?
That was a very beautiful concluding statement, actually, Stig. That was really nice. And now I would like to ask, unless there are any last-minute questions, I would like to leave it with that concluding statement, and then just ask Homero to give us a final poem.
Well, I must to tell you that I grew up in a village where millions of monarch butterflies arrived every year to spend the winter. Then, since I was a child, I was familiar with this migration, wonderful migration of butterflies, but also I was witnessing the destruction of the forest. And I have spent most of my life trying to stop this deforestation and trying to save the habitat of the monarch butterflies, as later I fought to save the marine turtles killed in Mexico by the thousands, and also try to stop industrial project in the lagoon San Ignacio, the lagoon where the gray whale come to Mexico every winter. For me, action is very important to save the environment, but not only human action, but human conscience. If we want to save the environment, to save the planet, we have to change humans who destroy the planet, have another mentality, very destructive, and we have to change, to tell them that they are not the owners of the planet and they are not the owners of life. I want to say something about as a last comment to this, that every day there is more news about planetary disasters. I am really anguished, because what I see every day in the news respect our planet, and we're approaching to a state of emergency. Out of control fires in Brazil, the United States, Australia, melting of glaciers under polar ice caps, hellish typhoons and hurricanes, destruction of coral reefs, species extinction, oceans with more plastic garbage than fish. I think it is urgent that all human beings become aware of the state of the earth. We must transform words into actions. I am calling for a movement of conscience for all humanity. It's not the fate of the earth is not in the hands of few humans, a few ecologists, but it's depending of all humanity. I am calling for a movement or concept of humanity to stop the destruction of the planet. Our best hope lies with young people, such as Linus and Greta, because I think that the children and teenagers have to defend life, who have not yet been sick because they have not yet been corrupted by ignorance, indifference, or cynicism of the so-called adult world. As I have said before, nature can live without humans, but humans cannot live without nature. And the future of the planet is going to be for our children and grandchildren, not just for us. I read now a poem based from my book, Time of Angels, because I witnessed the destruction of the monarch butterfly sanctuaries. In English or Spanish?
In English, please.
Yes. Through the night, coated in frost, the woods around my town wait for the light of dawn. Life like closed leaves, the monarch butterflies cover the trunk and branches of the trees, superimposed one upon the other like a single organism. The sky goes blue with cold. The first rays of sun touch the clusters of numb butterflies, and one bunch falls, opening into wings. Another cluster is lit, and through the effect of the light, splinters into 1,000 flying bodies. The 8 o'clock sun opens up a secret that slept perched on the trunks of the trees, and there is a breeze of winds, rivers of butterflies in the air. Visible through the bushes, the souls of the dead can be felt with the eye and hand. It is noon. In the perfect silence, the sound of a chainsaw is heard advancing toward us, chilling winds and felling trees. Man with his 1,000 naked and hungry children comes hauling his needs and shoving fistfuls of butterflies into his mouth. The angel says nothing. Thank you.
So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This was the concluding panel of the Bioeconomy series at the International Literature Festival. I still want to thank also the Science Year of the Federal Ministry of Education and Research for their support for this event series. And of course, many thanks to all our panelists and all the audience and the organizers. Thank you for your attention and have a good evening. Bye-bye.